Okay, we're going pretty deep today, and y'all know sometimes I like to start with something funny. I know many of y'all are celebrating Lent. Y'all are keeping Lent. And it's been a couple of years ago, one of my girlfriends had some surgery. And so I went and got her kids and took them to eat dinner that night. And when the waiter came and took our drink order, Allison said, I would like a Coke. And she went, oh no, wait, I've given up soft drinks for Lent. I'll have iced tea. And I looked at Tina's 13-year-old son, Andrew, and I looked at him and I said, what'd you give up for Lent? And he didn't miss a bit. He went, lying. This is the kid that's is skating through Vestavia High School on a wink and a smile. I mean, he's the cutest thing in the world. Oh, he's a mess. As y'all know, I am very sleep deprived, so I'm gonna have to heavily rely on my notes. One thing I want to mention about last class when we were talking about enslavement, and I had to give up the last 2 pages of my notes because I ran out of time, but I did not get to share with y'all President Kennedy's quote from a speech. And he said, there is a plot in this country to enslave every man, woman, and child. But before I leave this high and noble office, I intend to expose this plot. And that's what we talked about last week. That summarizes it right there. And he was assassinated a week later. And none of us are surprised with the release of the files that he was assassanated by the CIA and that Oswald had nothing to do with it. And there's more to come. Stay tuned. How many of y'all are familiar with the term spring cleaning? Well, that actually comes from Jewish lineage. And before Passover, you would clean your house out, and the children would help the mother to clean and tidy up. And the mother would always leave just a little bit of leaven in the kitchen somewhere, hiding. And when their dad would come home, they would scurry through the house, making sure everything was clean, and they would find the linen. And they would take leaven. They would take a linen cloth and sweep up the leaven. And they would take it outside to a community bonfire because everybody else and their children had done this. And that is just, it's a wonderful tradition. But you know, Paul told us, get the leaven out of your house. And what he meant by that was, it don't take much. It just takes a little bit of sin. Just a dab will do you. And as we are between Purim and Passover, and Amanda Gray said, there's a lot gonna happen between Purim and Passover. I think we need to do a little spring cleaning of our own. And sometimes we don't realize what we are exposing our bodies and our minds to. We can recognize pollutants from the environment. We're familiar with, physical contamination. Dirty water will make you sick. Spoiled foods are poisonous. But sometimes we fail to recognize spiritual contamination. And just as certain things in this life carry disease and infection in the natural world, there are things that carry this in the supernatural world. Sometimes you're struggling with things like fear, panic attacks, anxiety, just a lack of peace, turmoil, depression. And you may not recognize, that it's an attack from the enemy, but you just can't figure out, can't put your finger on where it's coming from, what the source of it is. My poor brother has been called to a fast, and Lord didn't have him give up food. Lord had him give up coffee for 30 days. And at the end of this fast, he was like, okay, things are going to get better. And I just laughed at him. But that's Jensen Franklin, I think he put it so perfectly. He said, you're not dealing with the enemy. God deals with the enemy. When you fast, what you're dealing with is what's in me. So that's what fasting is about. But anyway, we have personal attacks, and sometimes it's not from prayer or fasting or getting closer to the Lord. It's from something else, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Y'all know, biblically speaking, that objects have spiritual attachments. Doorways, you can invite darkness that you can't even see. And when Joshua, and I'm so sleep deprived, I left my Bible at home, so I'm just going to give y'all the verses. Deuteronomy 7:26. When Joshua led the Hebrews into the promised land, the Lord warned them, do not bring detestable things into your tent. If you do, this is how dangerous it was. If you do, you will be set apart for destruction just like them. That verse proves that objects can have a presence with them. And they can draw from the wrong kind of attention in the spirit realm. You know, it's not all, angels all around, like most of the Protestant church wants to think. That supernatural realm is good and bad. And I know that some of y'all are going to be thinking, okay, well, it's just a book, it's just a piece of jewelry, it's just a symbol. But how can an item have a spiritual influence? How can an object be tied to a spiritual power? Satan has never had an original idea in his life. All he does is counterfeit. And he saw that the Ark of the Covenant, it seated the Lord's glory. It held the Lord's glory. When Paul prayed over the handkerchiefs and they were dispersed and they brought healing, the enemy knows this. That's Acts 19 where Paul prayed over those. But objects, books, jewelry, they can hold a spiritual weight. Some of y'all know this, most of you don't. When I was still at Beth Hallel teaching, I would teach at lunch, and then by that night, after going back to work, I was spent, absolutely spent. And one night in particular, I had to work late. And just the Spirit was stirring inside of me, and he said, go to class tonight. Go to Rabbi's class. And I'm like, okay. So I went, I sat there, and I was doing everything I could not to fall asleep. I was so exhausted. Because, y'all know how I'm a night owl. I stay up till 12, 1 o'clock working on my lesson after working all day and fooling with how many times. But I was literally walking out to the parking lot after class, and I'm thinking, Lord, why did you have me here? And a friend of mine was walking with me, and we're standing at my car talking, and this girl came out of nowhere. And she walked up and she stuck her hand out to shake, and she said, "Hey, how are you?" And I'm like, mm. I had red flags in my spirit everywhere. And she said, I said, "What can I do for you?" And she said, "I'm looking for Rabbi Walker." I said, "He's not here." And she said, "Well, do you know where I can reach him?" And I said, "Eric left the congregation." And she said, "Well, when I've been in need before, Rabbi Walker has let me stay in the sanctuary." And I said, "Well, he ain't here, you can't stay, you need to leave." And she turned and walked off, and the guy that was standing there with me, he went, "Have you lost your mind?" He said, "Can't you see she's been beaten? She's probably trying to hide from her husband." And I went, I said, "Those aren't bruises. There's no purple, there's no green, there's no yellow. It's just black. That's war paint. She's a witch, and she's here to declare war on this congregation." And I called Alice Wood, and I said, "Where are you?" And she said, "I'm still here." I said, "Meet me in the sanctuary." And we scoured the sanctuary looking for a charged object with curses on it to see if she had been in there and left something. This stuff is real, folks. It's real. And if they can bring it in the churches, and they do, they can send it to your home. They can give you a gift, and you are none the wiser. That is where discernment comes in. And that is what we have to rely heavily on. Heirlooms. Do you know the history of things you have in your house? I had a phone call a couple of years ago, and this girl told me that her aunt had died and left her everything. And she said, "Peggy, she was extremely active in the Eastern Star, which is the Masonic, the female, the ladies part." And she said, "What do you suggest I do?" And I said, "Burn it all." I said, "Anything that has to do with that organization, it needs to be burned, it needs to be destroyed." Those things have ties on it. Remember the church at Ephesus? They burned their books. They had all of the witchcraft, the sorcery books. They burned them. That's in where is that? It's not in Ephesus. It's in Acts, isn't it? Like I said, I don't have my Bible with me. Okay, let's start with our handouts. A lot of y'all will just dismiss, show our viewing audience that this is a Ouija board. That's just a game, Peggy.
Yeah.
Well, that game has sold over 25 million boards. And the name Ouija came from the board itself when a medium was moving it around, and it spelled out the name when she asked, "What should we name you?" And this is the same medium who gave testimony, are you ready for this? To the U.S. Patent Board. That thing is patented. I know y'all think it's not real, but it is. Go to 1 Samuel 28, verse 3. That whole passage right there. The witch at Endor, when Saul, he went to consult the witch of Endor, and he asked her, "I need you to call up Samuel." She was able to do it. We don't know how she did it, but she was successful doing it. This is one way that they do it. Get it out of your house. Okay? This is the all-seeing eye. A lot of this is going to be jewelry. Y'all have seen the all-seeing eye, the eye of Horus. Peg, that's just fashionable. It's not evil. It'll protect me from evil. I had an attorney in my office tell me that. She is a born-again believer, and she told me, "This is to protect you from evil." And I went, "No, that's going to draw it to you." This is the same person who, when we have had in the past the fundraisers for the Obamas, Hillary, blah, blah, blah. She came in, she was so excited. I don't go to them, but she was so excited and came in and showed me a picture. She had her arm around Hillary Clinton, and I called her out. I said, you should not have been able to get within 20 foot of that woman. The hair on the back of your neck should have been standing straight up. She is so demonically possessed. Where is your discernment? People are mesmerized with celebrity. Crystals. And I know y'all probably can't see on the screen, but on your handouts, a lot of those are cut in the shape of an obelisk. It's to draw evil. Now, they claim that these things bring healing. Well, this is as new age as it gets, but there's nothing new about it. Y'all know my friend Richard Grund. He was delivered out of the New Age movement. And he has told me about the first time that a friend of his from the gym took him to buy some crystals. And he said they went into this sorcery shop, magic shop, and he said he wants to buy some crystals, and they took him to the back. And he told me, he said, as clear as I am talking to you, those things called out my name. And his theory is, and I have to agree with him. The Book of Enoch, it is not in our canon, but it is biblical history, and it is validated through numerous books, mainly the Book of Jude. And the Book of Enoch tells us that demons came from when the flood came. And the giants drowned. The giants were half human, they were half angelic beings. Those spirits were destroyed. That is where the bodies were destroyed, but the spirits remained. And Richard said, I am convinced that during the flood, some of their spirits, they just went into the rocks. And he said, but they spoke to me. This stuff is real. Okay, let's see. This one is a dream catcher. This is a Native American thing. I don't know what you call it, but they call it a dream catcher. And I see it everywhere. I see it in cars. I see it on people's in their yards. They have them in their homes. And Richard has been, since he was delivered, he has been working in deliverance for over 20 years. And I have seen the video. A lady contacted him and she said, look, and she was a believer. She said, there's something in my house. I need your help. Y'all gotta come. Y'all gotta get this thing out. And Richard said, before he will ever take a case, he does massive amounts of research. And he told her, he said, do you have surveillance? Do you have a burglar alarm? Do you have any kind of equipment? And she said, yeah, we have an alarm system. And she gave him access to it. And after studying all of these videos, he literally, and you can see it on the film, she had her computer online in the kitchen, and she had a dream catcher on the wall, and you can see she was not in the room, but her computer was on. I do not know where it was, where the IP address was logged into, but that spirit came out of that computer and went straight to that dream catcher. I saw it. It brought oppression. It brought uneasiness. She could sense a darkness, a dark presence in her home.
They keep sending us those in the mail, and I just keep throwing them away.
Throw them away. Throw them away. Well, this right here, this is, I'm going to butcher the way you say this. Hamsa. You see them all over Israel? The hand?
Yeah.
Well, they're all over Israel. They must be good. People come home with them left and right. No, that is the hand of Fatima. Do y'all know who Fatima was? Muhammad's daughter. And it's usually, just like I showed you this one, it's usually got the all-seeing eye in the middle of it. I heard Reverend Graham say one time, what you possess can in turn possess you. Be careful. But it doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't matter. But what matters is what's in the spiritual realm. So many people get tattoos of like this. This is the lotus flower that y'all have. That's a New Age sign. And then this is the flower of life. That's another one. People wear this in jewelry. I see the lotus sticker a lot on cars, bumper stickers, window stickers. But they're signs of New Age. They go right in with yoga. And I gave you on the other side of the hand is the yoga mat. And this is not, there's exercise mats, yes, but this is a yoga mat that outlines the positions. And people tell me, they said, well, my church, they teach yoga. Well, I've also seen churches promote Harry Potter and the Twilight series. The Twilight series specifically to the teenagers because the characters in the book were chaste. But what they don't understand is that vampires and werewolves are real. Y'all have heard me give my testimony, okay? Those that we have got missionaries on Hopi Indian Reserve that have seen people fast and dance and pray and transform into wolves. They've seen it. People they don't want to realize how unaware they are of what is around us that we can't see. You should be able to sense it. Women have a higher discernment than men. I don't know why, we just do. I could go off on a tangent on that one, but the Lord has given that to us for a specific purpose. But those yoga mats, yoga is it is a godly worship for the god Shiva, the Hindu god Shiva, the one that has all the arms. It's called the Destroyer. Let me ask you this. You don't think twice about having a yoga mat in your house, would you have a Muslim prayer rug? Because it's the same thing. You're bowing down to another god. My people perish for lack of knowledge. Books on meditation. Unfortunately, I heard Priscilla Schreier give a lecture one time, and she said, when you pray, you just need to go in your prayer closet and you need to just clear your mind. No, that is as New Age as it comes. The enemy is infiltrating the church, and he wants to take just this slither of truth and just, what's the word I'm looking for? Contaminate it. All right, what about memos from past toxic relationships? Rings, letters, pictures, jewelry, address. Those are soul ties. Those are soul ties. You need to get rid of them. You need to get rid of them. As long as you keep that stuff, the bond will remain. I did not get a picture of tarot cards. Y'all know what they look like. I heard Pastor Hagee 20 years ago tell about they got a phone call at his church, and this woman insisted on speaking directly to him, and he finally answered the phone, and he said, "How can I help you?" And she said, I have a problem. She said, "Something has entered me." And he said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "Well, somebody gave me a deck of tarot cards, and I thought they were just harmless. I was playing with them, but something happened. Will you please come?" So he went over, and make a long story short, whatever the sequence of these patterns of cards were, it summoned a being, and it went into her. It had what? An invitation. And he had to cast that demon out of her. These are born again believers. I have told y'all, my sister is experiencing demonic possession. And my brother and I have wondered, where did it come from? We were raised by the same Christian family. Where did this come from? And y'all, I'm not talking about my sister's a little off. My brother and my cousin both have seen it manifest. My cousin called me crying one day, and I said, "What is wrong?" He said, "I went by your sister's house," and he said, "Peggy, she was cussing me in a man's voice," and he said, "Her eyes were red." He said, "They were red as fire." And I said, "Why don't you come by my office this afternoon? Let's sit down and talk." And I had to explain to him, God love him, he's a good Southern Baptist. He's never been exposed to this stuff. But it's real. But I remember, I told Brian, my brother, I remember I was probably 4 or 5. We're 14 years apart. I was probably younger than that. And I walked in her bedroom one day, and her best friend had one of those, and they were playing with it. And if my father knew they had been in our house, you never know what your kids are going to do. These things, all of these items, they're a beacon. They are a beacon to the demonic. If you have got anything in your house that you have the slightest inkling of a red flag, get rid of it. Don't try and justify keeping it. Well, I paid a lot of money for it. So-and-so gave it to me. They will be insulted if they come over here and it's not here. You need to think about your relationship with the person that gave it to you then. You do not get in my house. You don't get past my threshold unless my dogs give you the approval. Anytime that I have workers, anybody that's coming, you gotta pass through them first. Why? Balaam's donkey. When Balaam had been to see the king of Moab, and he was coming back, and the Lord was upset with him because what he had sold his soul to do, and his donkey, the Lord put an angel in front of him, and Balaam couldn't see it. Balaam could not see into the spirit realm. He couldn't see through that veil, but that animal could. When animals don't like people, there's a reason. And I will have you know, not a dog I have ever had liked my sister. Not one of them. Not one. Ask yourself this. Whatever you have questions about, are you willing to put it before the Most High God? Would He accept it? Would it be pleasing to Him? Would it glorify Him? Ask yourself that. If you have any doubts, get rid of it. Now, sometimes it's not just objects. It's some things that come home and attach themselves to you where you go. So many people, and it doesn't necessarily affect believers, but it's non-believers who are not covered by the blood of Jesus. When you are traveling and you go to the Aztec pyramids in Central and South America, or you are, okay, servicemen that have served in the Gulf War, we have come to find out, Richard and I have been working with PTSD sufferers for a while now, and so many times it is not what they saw as far as war, it is what they saw in the spirit realm that manifested while they were there. And almost everyone that I have ever talked to, I ask them, what'd you do on your free time when you were in near Babylon, near the green zone? They would go to those ziggurats and they'd crawl all over them.
They go to the what?
The ziggurats. It's a step pyramid. That's what the Tower of Babel was. It was a pyramid. These Aztec pyramids that are in the Americas, that's where they sacrifice. The blood would run down all the sides. I was invited to a conference in Dallas that Dr. Thomas Ice was hosting. And I'll never forget, I walked in the foyer of the hotel, Charlotte and I did, and Andy Wood, Dr. Andy Wood from Sugarland Baptist. If y'all are not familiar with my buddy Andy Wood, y'all need to listen to him. He is the best teacher. He was an attorney, and the Lord called him into the ministry. So if you want to talk, pick a book, Acts. Oh, that's a 9-month study. But it's all on online access. But Andy came in, he saw me, grabbed me, he hugged me, and he's like, I am so glad to see you. I hadn't seen you in so long. And he went, who invited you? Because I was the only person there that didn't have a PhD behind their name. And I said, Randall. And he went, okay. Y'all, it was so over my head. My head would hurt. I'm going, it was so deep. It was incredible, but it was so deep. And I went home, I went back to the hotel that night, and I'm going, Lord, why did you got me here? Why am I here? It's hard for me to learn anything. I can't comprehend this stuff. And I told Charlotte, I said, I'm gonna fly on home. I don't know why. I'm just gonna fly home in the morning. And I called the front desk and said, do you have a driver to take me to the airport? They said, yes, ma'am. We'll get you set up. And I was the only person going to the airport, and he told me, he said, in the van, he said, just sit up front with me. And I'm like, okay, Lord, what are you up to? And I said, how long have you been working at the hotel? And he said, I just started this job. He said, I was raised in Virginia. He said, that's where my ex-wife and my kids are. He said, but I needed a new start. He said, my marriage didn't survive my last tour in Iraq. Mm-hmm. And I knew in my spirit, and I said, are you having night terrors? And he cut his eyes at me, and I said, you keep up with the guys in your unit? He said, yes, ma'am. I said, how many of them are contemplating suicide? Well, he just looked at me, turkey neck, and he said, how do you know? And I said, whatever you tell me that you saw on that plain of Shinar, whatever you saw, I will believe you. Tears just poured out of this kid. They cannot go to the VA because a psychologist will lock them up.
Yeah.
What the Gulf War has a higher the servicemen suffering from PTSD, quote quote, have a higher suicide rate that is 4 times over World War II. What is it? What is causing it? Everything started on that plain of Shinar. Everything. The Tower of Babel, everything. That is ground zero for witchcraft. It's ground zero for the satanic. And these kids are coming home with it, and they don't know. I shared that at Beth Hallel years ago, and someone in our class called me a couple of months later, and she said, I just want you to know you saved my brother's life tonight. And I said, well, how did I do that? And she said, he's an Iraqi war veteran. And she said, I knew he was struggling with depression, but she said he called me at 2 o'clock in the morning. And he told her, he said, I've got a gun in my mouth. I'm going to end this. I can't take this anymore. I just cannot do this anymore. And she said, Peggy, I remember what you said when you shared that story. And she said, I told him, whatever you saw there, whatever you experienced, tell me and I will believe you. And he put the gun down and he told her. And she said, it scared me to death and I didn't see the stuff. So please keep that in mind when you are engaged with anyone who is served. We have to be aware of the spiritual realm, the dangerous spiritual realm. You know, this young man, he had a door open that he needed help closing that he didn't even know had been opened. And that's so many times the case. Harry Potter books, movies, toys, oh yeah. Oh, I have friends that go round and round with me on this. When you cast a spell, the verbiage is very specific. You have to, when you are teaching a witch how to cast a spell, the verbiage has to be perfect. And Harry Potter, that is spell casting 101. Mm-hmm. And do you know who told me that? A pagan high priest. Wow. Get that stuff out of your house. Please do not go to Harry Potter World at Disney World or Epcot or wherever that thing is. The majority of these spirits slip in. But what we're finding out now is they're coming with invitation. How can they do that, Peggy? How can they come into a believer's home with an invitation? Let me tell you. The guy that had walked me out to my car that night that we experienced the witch, he confided in me later because I recognized it. He said, I've got a problem in my home. And he said, there's something there. And this is a long story short, but Richard, I called Richard and he agreed to come. He brought the team, and I have the pictures if you want to see them, but there were more orbs. There were more demonic spirits on this property than Richard had ever experienced in his ministry. And the one thing, the one common denominator that these spirits had, the family had bought the home from the bank because the girl who owned it before them had committed suicide in it. And where there's shed innocent blood, the enemy's a legalist. He wants legal access so he can stand on it. But that's what we thought the root was, but we were totally wrong. We thought that was the invitation, was shed innocent blood, where someone has been murdered, where an abortion has taken place. Shed innocent blood. They have a right to be there. And these spirits, that whole night when Richard was making them leave the property, they kept saying one word, Holly, 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 Holly. Holly was the family's 12-year-old daughter. And after Richard was able to make them leave, he told the father, he said, can I talk to Holly? And so we spoke with her and she denied it. And I don't know anything about witchcraft. And I told Richard, I said, give me a few minutes with her. And I said, look, I know you're lying. I know you're practicing witchcraft. I need you to tell me where you, being raised in a Christian home, where did you learn it? I said, you can deny it all you want. I said, where did you learn this? And she said, from my best friend's mom.
Wow.
Asked me where she knows her best friend from. Beth Hallel, our church. If y'all don't think witches are not infiltrating, they're everywhere. Yeah, Sandy, you're right. They're everywhere. Now I'm running out of time again. Let me get. I'm halfway. Let me get to. All right. What else affects the human body? Let's talk about frequencies. This is actually how this lesson came to be. I talked to Richard a couple of weeks ago, and I said, Satan works hard. I mean, Satan works smart. He doesn't work hard. And 57 million Americans suffer from depression. And there are 1 in 10 Americans over the age of 12 that are on antidepressant medication. 22% of that population are Christians. Now, I just had a sense in my spirit that I remembered the story I shared with y'all about the missionary that was in Nepal back in the 30s, and he just had opposition after opposition, and you just felt like he was beating his head against a closed door. And then one day it just lifted, and he had people that started becoming believers, and it was so much easier to share the gospel. And he inquired of the Lord. He went, "What happened?" And he said, "The demons have left. They went to Germany." And 3 months later, he read where Adolf Hitler had become the chancellor. They were summoned. And I feel that in my spirit, they have been summoned to our soul. This is an all-out war. I've told you and told you and told you. The only thing that prohibits global government is the sovereignty of this nation. When we're gone, it's over. But, I just got to thinking about that. I'm like, there's only so many demons. They have to be doing something to, instead of one-on-one opposition with depression, they've got to be doing something to create this demonic oppression through something. Well, I had heard, and I didn't understand this, but when Michael Jackson recorded his song, Heal the World, he got into a huge dispute with his record label because he wanted to record it at 432 megahertz frequency, and they insisted on him doing it 440, and he said, "I'm not going to do the song." And so they finally gave in and said, "Okay, we'll let you do it." The record label had the same problem with Prince. And come to find out, it's not just who's singing the song or what they're singing, but it's the frequency that it's broadcast on. And 440 is a man-made frequency that was developed in the 30s in Stuttgart. And Adolf Hitler, I have to think that he brought this, the demons brought this information with them. You want to use this frequency, and this is what he would broadcast his propaganda speeches with.
And it was changed for all music.
Yeah, that's where I'm going. Dr. Leonard Horowitz wrote an essay titled "Musical Cult Control: The Rockefeller's Foundation War on Consciousness Using 440 megahertz standardized tuning." They claim that the tuning, they want everything tuned to this so that if you're a guitarist and you want to go and play on another continent with another group, if you're invited, that everything will already be in tune, because that's a universal tune. No, 432 is the universal frequency. Now, I don't have a TikTok account because of their policy. You basically give them control of your phone when you join. But you can go to TikTok, and this girl is Crystal, CRYSTL.SN, and she will play some notes at frequency 432, and then she will play the notes at 440, and the difference is daylight and dark. And it is proven that this 440 frequency, it produces anxiety, it produces stress. You can measure it through your heart rate, through your blood pressure. Now, there are a lot of sites on YouTube that you can search for 432 to listen to music. But this presenter that I told you, this Crystal chick, she showed this sound image of water that is listening to one frequency, and then the other one is listening to the other frequency. And so that led me to, what is that? A water sound image. Well, 30 years ago, Dr. Masaru Emoto, who is a Japanese scientist, he had a theory that words affect water. And this is what the man did. He had his students to take bottles of water, and on one group, they would say to the water, "We love you, you're so pretty, thank you, we appreciate you." They would say kind things. And the other students had their other bottles, and they spoke hateful things to this water. "You're ugly, you're stupid." And the students even told Dr. Emoto that they didn't like the way they felt when they were speaking this over this water. Well, what the scientist did was he took both samples and he froze it. That's hard to say. And he looked at it under a microscope. And this is what he saw. These are some examples I gave y'all. These are gorgeous, symmetrical ice crystals of the words that were kind, and then the ones that were spoken hateful things over, they were contorted, they were disfigured. And he went on to conduct another experiment, and this is on the second page, where it's not just words that he's saying, but music that he exposed it to. Classical music formed those beautiful formations, whereas the heavy metal stuff and the rap stuff, it was distorted. Now, Dr. Emoto, he went on to take this experiment just a little bit further. And he did it with rice. And I picked the wrong picture. I gave y'all the rice experiment of just the two, the I love you and I hate you. But in the experiment, there was actually another one that they didn't speak to at all. They just ignored it. And after 30 days, the rice that was spoken I love you to, it was fermenting and it had a very sweet aroma to it. And the one they said hateful things to, it rotted. And the one that was ignored, it rotted. And I thought about this. You know, there were a lot of Nazi experiments on Jewish children. And one of the experiments that they did was they took twins. They took newborn twins. And one of them they raised with a family. The other one was raised in an orphanage and was never given any attention. It was given food, it was given care, but it was not given love. And for whatever reason, that baby just died. Just died. Where the other one was flourishing. Why is this so important? Proverbs 18:21. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. When Dr. Emoto's students were speaking wonderful things and hateful things over this water, our bodies are 70% water. Everything that we say, everything that we're subjected to, even if it's coming out of our own mouths, our body is subjected to it. My best friend, who I love and adore, I don't remember life without her. All she says is, I'm so unhealthy. I am exhausted. I'm never going to get into shape. When Marsha Johnson was diagnosed with cancer, I had to get on to her because she told me, she said, I have cancer. I said, quit professing that. You're going to have it. You can say, I have been diagnosed with cancer. That doesn't give a hold. But when you're gonna have what you claim, and that's what comes out of your mouth. Dr. Emoto's experience prove that words and sounds, music, literally affect every single cell in our body. There's no denying it. Words, sounds, music, they are unique forms of energy, vibration, and frequency. And our bodies respond accordingly. We have to be so careful of what we cannot see. And the spirit realm, heaven, it's not some faraway place. It's right here. Here's the veil, right here. I'm going to share one more thing with you, and I'm going to let you go. But another way, and unfortunately, another way that we do bring this on ourselves, besides what we listen to or objects that we are exposed to. Matthew 18:34, Jesus is talking about unforgiveness, and he gives the parable of where the man owed the king a bunch of money and he threw him in prison, but the king forgave him for all the thousands of dollars he owed him. But then the man went to the other person and said, you owe me $100, and he had him thrown in prison after he had been extended all this grace and mercy. And Matthew 18:34, if we do not forgive, if we do not extend the mercies that have been extended to us, God will give you over to your tormentors. And this is why we see so many people who have unforgiveness in their heart that are sick. They cannot get well. They are in constant pain. Everything is going wrong, and it's just a life of misery. Unforgiveness will shorten your life, and what life it is, it will be miserable. Discernment. We must have discernment for such a time as this. I've told y'all, I sense the demonic activity has increased since President Trump has won the election, and it's getting worse by the day. And it is our job as the remnant. The church has no clue what's going on.
No.
They're oblivious to it. The watchman on the wall, we have been called to sound the alarm. And when you have friends or family members, we've got a member of this class, and when her daughter had divorced, and they divorced because of her daughter's she changed. She went on a vacation and she changed. And they divorced and she moved home and she told me, she said, something's wrong. She said, Peggy, there's something in my house. She said, there's something wrong. And come to find out, it was some souvenirs that her daughter had brought back from South America. They can have curses on them. It's time to clean out our house. It's time to be aware of what our kids and our grandkids have got in their rooms, what they have. It could be something as innocent as something that they got at a birthday party. But if it's tied to Disney and to their agenda, get rid of it. I'm out of time. God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Lord, your daughters just petition your throne. We ask for wisdom, Lord. Your word promises us that if we lack anything, all we have to do is ask, and you will extend it to us. Father, we prostrate ourselves before you, and we ask that you would give us wisdom and discernment. Start in our own house, in our own temple, Lord. Is there anything that is unpleasing to you? Is there anything that is affecting our walk with you, our relationship? We won't want anything that is a barrier between us, oh God. And Father, we just ask that you would give us spiritual eyes to see. Let us pierce that veil. Let us be able to look beyond and see in the supernatural what needs to be dealt with. Father, this is heavy. It's disconcerting, but it's something we have to deal with. And we just ask that as a merciful Father, Lord, that you would just direct us to anything that we need to remove from our lives. Father, we love you. We thank you for this time together. And as always, we ask that every prayer prayed and every word spoken be absorbed into the walls of this facility and echo into the hearts of the men and women who come here. We ask these in the most precious name above all names, Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen.
You know what else the churches did wrong?